everyone, welcome back to a game analysis recap of my tournament in Germany. This is round 7 out of 9. I currently have 4 out of 6 in the tournament, and let me tell you, this game was quite crazy. We start off with my opponent having the white pieces on me, the black pieces, and playing e4, starting us off. And since everybody can know my repertoire, I went for a move that I have never played before in my life against e4 in a classical tournament, c5. In this opening, I had prepared against what he always plays, which is knight f3 and then d4, and he later told me that he plays this all the time, but in this game he knew that I don't play c5, so then he flipped the tables on me. He played knight c3, which usually is a closed Sicilian defense and just like goes for completely closed structures. It's a completely different move than the open Sicilian, right? Where white opens up the position, trades on d4. And now I'm like, oh no, in my head, but I still have to keep a poker face because obviously. And so I go with knight c6 and I play as if. My opponent also didn't know what he was doing. This is the first time he played this over the board as well with white, knowing that I was prepared against him, so then he uno reverse prepared against me and played knight c3. And now he plays bishop b5, which goes into a Rossolimo Sicilian. This has been picking up a lot of steam for white in the past year. The white pieces have excellent results in the Rossolimo, so I definitely knew that coming into this third move, and I was like, oh no, what if he's like actually prepared? Basically this entire game I'm double guessing myself. Maybe it made me more alert, but also it definitely made me think twice, 3 times about every single move and just play chess for chess, right? I just played chess logically. So I go d6 and he trades early. This is completely normal. d3, which is synonymous with the close position. Basically, they're gonna have a structure like this, and I have a structure like this. My opponent is not nobody. He has 2,000 rating, 2,032 to be precise, and I'm coming in here into this round with 4 out of 6, 1876, and he's higher rated. He's the top seed. He's the top seed in this game. So I have to defend and play well here. So g6 is played. I want to bring my bishop in the fianchetto, as in completely normal Sicilian defense style. If I go for an early knight f6, I don't know. I think like f4 and e5 things are too natural for white. So I just go with a pleasant g6, and then after f4, bishop g7. So there's no e5 directly on my knight, poking at my center, poking at my pawn structure. And so now knight f3 to finish castling, and I go rook b8. Rook b8 is a small inaccuracy. It's not a bad move. The rook restricts the b2 pawn for the bishop to keep defending it. And if white just like tries to get the bishop off of the defense of b2, well then I have a beautiful apple pie. The downside of it is that it restricts my development. So after rook b8 and castles, I can't really go knight f6 and continue my development on the king side to then castle as well, because white has e5, which is really annoying. And I thought a lot about this and I really didn't like the outcome of it. If I just move my knight out, there's e takes d6, and if queen takes, forget it. My pawn structure is completely messed up. Even knight e4 looks like it wins a pawn directly. So I didn't even consider that. But most likely I would take with the e pawn, and now the e file is completely open on my king, and there's rook e1 check coming in. And I didn't like knight e7 because of queen e2 things preventing my castle, right? If I castle here, my king is off the knight and I lose a piece outright. And I didn't like either bishop e6 because the bishop is just attackable. Instead, I go for knight h6. I'm putting my knight on kind of a bad square, but it's the only thing that I liked to proceed with this development. I gotta get my king to safety. And so my opponent goes with queen e1 here. Such a nice move. Queen e1 I love because of e5 coming in, but also for queen h4 plans. My opponent does one of these two plans in the game. So it's really important to analyze what your opponent is going to do in advance so you can be occupied, you can be ready for their advances. And so I castle, and after queen h4, I was ready for queen h4 because there's some annoying attacks, g4, g5, attacking my knight, and rook lifts, etc., just like a kingside attack. So after queen h4, I was prepared, and I go for e6. The engine doesn't like e6, it says it's inaccurate because it likes white if we trade off. Though I really like black if we trade off because I have plans with c4, and overall I like this. The engine says takes, rook takes, and small advantage for white after e5. going onto my center and closing out my bishop from its tremendous diagonal. It's arguable, it's fair. White wants to keep the queens on the board and plays knight g5 because they have a thrilling attack that they just want to continue and continue. Knight g5 is a mistake here, says the engine, because although it restricts my knight on h6, my knight can't move, otherwise it's checkmate by the queen on h7. This knight is restricted. It can't move. My queen is pinning this knight to the queen, and if the knight ever wants to be liberated, knight f3 just trades off queens and the knight is out of play on h4, like once it takes back the queen on h4. So this knight is kind of frozen in space, and it begs the question, what is it actually doing here except for restraining my knight on h6? And so now I go for the c4 move, a breakthrough move. c4, okay, it's a move. It's a sacrificial move. I'm sacking a pawn for a better position, and I'm also trying to break this pawn structure here, but there's more depth to that move. And I later found out that my opponent didn't even know that I had this tactic on d takes c4. Rook takes b2. It's really nice. I'm sacking the exchange here, and if the bishop takes, it's attracted to a bad square in which my queen can now fork this king and this bishop on b2. The king has to move, let's say king h1, and after I take the bishop, this is why I sack more material than I take, is because when taking back, I have so much power. With my queen linking up with the bishop, old friends seeing each other for the first time in 5 years, attacking this knight, the pressure on the knight is overwhelming, the knight must move. We don't take here, we take on c2 instead, and attack these, and attack this rook by discovery. The rook is forced to defend the knight, and then we take this pawn. My opponent does not play this. Instead, he ups the stakes. He takes a 20-minute move, actual 20-minute move, from 107 to 46 minutes, something like this, to play this next move, and that is f5. I included the eval bar in this recap and for the future ones, and I included some feedback, which is the mistake that you see there in orange. But it's easy to jump to conclusions, but this is a really complex move. Put yourself in my shoes. What would you do here as black? It's really not obvious what f5 is for. It looks like it just gives a pawn outright. And so you calculate. You calculate takes, bishop takes. The knight can never move, once again, because of checkmate on h7. So this knight never moves, never think of that knight moving. But what if takes? And that's what I played, and my opponent revealed to me after the game that this was not to take back the pawn on c4, which would have not been that nice for white. I mean, here it's equal. They take back the pawn that they sacrificed, and I love knight g4 for black here. Threatening things like queen b6 here to win the exchange. Let's say h3, let's just give an example. Queen b6 check, king here, and if h3 wasn't played, then I would force the rook to take because I would have mate, otherwise a very, very known smothered mate. And here it's just like really nice for the black pieces. My pieces are really imposing. I get to kick all of their pieces. Let's say knight here, then I go d5. It's like really nice. And so that was never his intention. He revealed to me after the game, this guy was super honest. Shout out Christian Gluma. My opponent revealed to me that he was absolutely clueless after sacking this. He was super confused. He did not know what to do with white. And it's crazy because he held a crazy poker face during the game where I was like, what is this guy thinking about for 20 minutes and then just sacking a pawn? This is like the most ominous man on earth. And finally he plays knight e4, which makes sense when you look at it. The knight is coming into the attack and it's threatening maybe knight g3 to put pressure on this bishop, but it lacks substance. It lacks urgency. Where is the urgency of this move that's threatening some mates and things like this? There is none of it. Here, I have time as black because white is not threatening anything. I'm just a pawn up. I could just take here, c takes, and go like d5. Kick the knight to g3 and just take the pawn here. Like literally be 2 pawns up. And white has almost nothing here. Instead, I go for bishop takes first, which, okay, doesn't help the white pieces, doesn't help black. Well, I take out a nice defender on f5, but then I go for my trick of before. Now it doesn't work though. After rook takes, bishop takes, queen b6 check now, rook f2 to defend the check, queen takes. And this is an impulsive move order by me. I'm just so driven by the tension rising in this game that I quickly forget that I could have just played patient, even playing plain in that position, not even taking on b2. After takes, and I play rook b7, let's say, to defend this, black is completely fine, 1 pawn up, says the engine. And so after queen takes b2, my opponent played very well here with the rook f2, blocking the check instead of moving the king, so that now after queen takes b2 attacking the rook can go to f1, slide to f1, and double attack on that f-file. Although white are not attacking anything because I have 3 defenders, or so I thought. Here I have to make a case for my positional sacrifice. I am down material. I have 2 pawns and a bishop for a rook. I'm down material. I have to make a case for this sacrifice working. Now, in retrospect, queen e5, c3, even queen b7, these are all good moves. But here I fall into the trap that many of us fall into, and that's called greediness. And I go for queen takes a2. This is a blunder for several different reasons. On the psychology of the board, this queen on a2 is out of play. It's out of play, it can't defend the camp, it's not adding any spices to our attack, it's not counter-attacking anything. My pawn, yes, it's a pass pawn now, but it takes a lot of time to convert this type of thing in a position where I don't have a lot of time. Why? Because my opponent has so many pieces racked up against me. And for the second reason, there are tactics that I missed. Because I looked crazy mad times at knight takes, knight e6, rook takes. And sure enough, one of these tactics work. If you want to test yourself, you can pause the video to solve and then comment your answer down below if you want. But yeah, sure enough, knight e6 actually works. And I was thinking in the game, knight e6 does not work. I just take the knight, and after you take, and I take, even when you sack here on f8, king takes, and then queen takes h6 check, and then king g8 to defend the h7 pawn, and I have a load of pawns to win this game from, and in an equal queen endgame, but I have like 4 pawns up. It's completely winning for black. Little did I know, on f takes, rook takes, bishop takes, white has the sensational idea queen f6, instead going on a weak square and threatening checkmate in 1 move on this bishop. And here the black pieces surrender on impact. I can't defend this bishop, again, a reason being my queen is out of play. If my queen was on b2, thank you so much for the win, I go back to b8. But because my bishop can't go anywhere, let's say bishop g7, here there's queen d8 check, putting my king in a mating net and forcing bishop back to f8, to which checkmate is game over. And after knight e6, I went for rook e8, and shout out to my opponent for spotting this second insane tactic. White to play and win, if you want to pause the video to solve, it's really different than the knight e6 thing. Here my opponent goes knight takes g7, king takes, queen f6 check, king back. Can you find the winning move? It's not obvious. Like, this is rook a1. Newly defended by this queen, trapping my queen on the edge of the board, punishing the very square my queen chose to take that pawn in greedy fashion. I was very mad, because I feel like I had a small advantage throughout this game, and I was a pawn up at one point, and I exploded, I imploded. And here I resigned. My opponent, Christian Gluma, who now has 5 out of 8, 5 out of 7, sorry, this was round 7. So now he has 5 out of 7, went on to score it 7 out of 9. And took 5th place, or 3rd, he took like 5th place in this tournament. 5th or 7th place. He took 7th place, sorry, in this tournament, with 7 out of 9. Guy went on to win 2 consecutive games, one against an FM and one against an IM, like incredible tournament. So I'm not taking out anything from this win, even though he said he was clueless in the middle game, which is true. He kept saying, I'm very confused. I shouldn't have won this. It's a very lucky game. It's a very lucky game. And so yeah, shout out Christian Gluma. It was a good game, and congratulations for such an amazing tournament finish. But yeah, that is game 7. I now have 4 out of 7. It pains me to say that. I have 2 rounds left in this tournament. I hope I can pull it back for the final 2 rounds.